Gypsy-Rose Blanchard recounts her harrowing life, dominated by her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard, who controlled and manipulated her under the guise of care. Dee Dee gave birth to Gypsy when she was 24, and their relationship became one of extreme codependency, which Dee Dee described as two sides of the same penny. However, this bond masked the darker reality of abuse and control, culminating in Gypsy orchestrating her mother's murder when she was nearly 24. The act, which led to Gypsy's incarceration, was her desperate attempt to escape years of torment and reclaim her life. While serving her sentence, spanning over 8 years in various facilities, Gypsy had time to reflect deeply on her life. Therapy, self-examination, and access to records and information helped her uncover the extent of her trauma and make sense of patterns that once confounded her. Despite her release, the scars, both physical and emotional, remain. She describes how the surgeries and medications her mother forced upon her left her body permanently altered, including the loss of her teeth and salivary glands, making simple joys like eating a challenge. Her scars symbolize the abuse she endured and add layers to her ongoing healing process. The story unfolds with Gypsy reflecting on a pivotal moment a month before the murder. Dee Dee's insistence on an unnecessary larynx surgery became a metaphorical and literal breaking point. Throughout Gypsy's life, Dee Dee fabricated illnesses and subjected her to medical procedures under the guise of care, a pattern rooted in Munchausen syndrome by proxy. By the age of 23, Gypsy had already endured countless surgeries and unnecessary treatments, many of which caused her significant pain and long-term damage. As she grew older and began to realize the extent of her mother's lies, Gypsy's resistance to Dee Dee's control increased, but so did her mother's desperation to maintain dominance. The incident at the pulmonologist's office marked a crucial turning point. Dee Dee complained about Gypsy's high-pitched voice and convinced the doctor to recommend exploratory surgery on her larynx, ostensibly to address sleep apnea, a condition Dee Dee falsely claimed Gypsy had. For Gypsy, the suggestion of surgery on her voice box felt like an existential threat. Already burdened by scars from prior neck surgeries, Gypsy's fear and rage boiled over. Her voice, symbolic of her autonomy and expression, was at stake. She saw this as her mother's ultimate attempt to silence her permanently. This confrontation highlighted Dee Dee's escalating attempts to control Gypsy. Despite knowing the truth about her fabricated illnesses, Gypsy felt trapped. Dee Dee's manipulations had ensured that no one would believe Gypsy if she tried to expose her mother. Their dynamic became a standoff. Gypsy knew her mother's actions were criminal, but Dee Dee maintained power through deceit and fear. The prospect of more surgeries and invasive procedures loomed as Gypsy's future, leading her to view her survival as dependent on escaping her mother's grasp, even if it meant taking extreme measures. Gypsy's reflections also delve into the profound psychological effects of her mother's abuse. Dee Dee not only controlled her daughter's physical body but also deprived her of a voice, both literally and metaphorically. She scripted Gypsy's interactions, numbed her mouth with medications, and even used devices like CPAP machines to create the illusion of illness. Over time, these measures eroded Gypsy's sense of identity and agency. The thought of losing her literal voice through surgery became a tipping point, crystallizing her realization that she needed to act to save herself. The murder itself stemmed from this desperate need for liberation. Gypsy enlisted her then-boyfriend, Nick Gojon, to carry out the act, believing it was the only way to escape Dee Dee's control. While this decision ultimately led to her imprisonment, Gypsy viewed it as an act of self-preservation. In the aftermath, she has grappled with the moral and emotional implications of her actions. She acknowledges the complexity of her relationship with her mother, recognizing both the love and the deep dysfunction that defined it. Now, post-incarceration, Gypsy continues to navigate the challenges of healing and rebuilding her life. She reflects on how her past shapes her present, from the physical scars that remind her of her ordeal to the emotional scars that influence her relationships and self-perception. Despite these challenges, Gypsy's journey represents a quest for autonomy and a determination to reclaim her voice, both figuratively and literally. Gypsy's story sheds light on the insidious nature of abuse and the resilience required to overcome it. Her experiences highlight the importance of recognizing and addressing complex dynamics of control and manipulation, as well as the profound impact of trauma on individuals' lives. While her journey is far from over, Gypsy's reflections offer a powerful testament to the human capacity for survival and growth in the face of unimaginable adversity. The narrator's account of her mother, Claudine, Dee Dee, Blanchard, offers a glimpse into a life defined by manipulation, insecurity, and deceit. Dee Dee grew up in Golden Meadow, Louisiana, a small town in Lafourche Parish known for its strong Cajun heritage. This heritage was central to Dee Dee's identity, shaping the way she spoke and interacted with the world. Dee Dee had a unique way of speaking, often dropping the H sound, a characteristic feature of the Cajun dialect. Though she had a quirky speech pattern, it was part of her larger-than-life persona, one that she carefully cultivated, especially in the stories she told others. Her childhood, however, was far from the idyllic picture of Southern life. Dee Dee was the youngest of 6 children, all named after their father, Claude. This created a narcissistic dynamic in the family, one in which Claude was an imposing figure. Claude Petre, Dee Dee's father, was an unstable man, often described as a man whore, and his relationships with women were marked by infidelity. This set the stage for Dee Dee's complicated relationship with him. From an early age, she suffered from emotional and sexual trauma, which she kept hidden for much of her life. Dee Dee's mother, Emma, was cold and often critical of her appearance, leading Dee Dee to struggle with body image issues. These early experiences contributed to Dee Dee's lifelong feelings of insecurity. As a teenager, Dee Dee's appearance was a source of constant anxiety. She battled with eating disorders including anorexia and bulimia, trying to control her body and her image. Her mother's harsh criticisms only exacerbated Dee Dee's obsession with appearance. Dee Dee began to drink vinegar in an effort to lighten her skin, an indication of how deeply she felt the need to meet societal standards of beauty. By high school, Dee Dee had lost a significant amount of weight, and her appearance became a point of pride. She even became the ROTC Queen in 1986, an achievement she clung to for the rest of her life. This title, however, was one of the few moments in her youth when she felt truly special. Dee Dee's fixation on beauty and acceptance seemed to drive her later relationships. She often exaggerated or fabricated stories about her past, claiming that she had been pursued by famous musicians and celebrities. One such tale involved her alleged romantic involvement with Jack Russell, the lead singer of the band Great White, although there was no evidence to back up her claims. She seemed to crave validation from others, constantly reshaping her history to fit the narrative she wanted others to believe. This need for admiration became a central theme in her life, one that she projected into her relationships and interactions with those around her. In 1990, Dee Dee met Rod Blanchard, a 17-year-old shrimp trawler from Louisiana. Dee Dee immediately claimed to be 21, although she was actually 23 at the time. Rod, who was still a teenager, was charmed by Dee Dee and the idea of having an older girlfriend who could buy him alcohol and drive him around. Despite this initial attraction, Dee Dee quickly took control of the relationship, using her pregnancy as leverage to bind Rod to her. They married quickly, with Dee Dee pressuring Rod into the union. The wedding, however, was far from romantic. Rod had to ask his mother for permission to marry Dee Dee, as he was underage. The ceremony was filled with chaos, including Rod's arrest for driving without a license and a lack of wedding rings. After the ceremony, they celebrated at a local bar, where Rod drank heavily and spoke to his old friends and ex-girlfriends. That night, they stayed in Dee Dee's parents' house, where they planned to live temporarily. Rod's work as a shrimp trawler kept him away for long periods of time, and Dee Dee's insecurities deepened in his absence. She grew paranoid and isolated herself, pushing away friends and family. Rod's infidelities, especially one that resulted in another woman getting pregnant, added fuel to Dee Dee's feelings of betrayal. Dee Dee's reaction was one of anger and vengeance, as she tried to manipulate the situation to regain control over her life. When Rod's mistress came to Dee Dee for financial help, Dee Dee refused to support her, but she did provide baby supplies, possibly as a way of asserting her authority in the situation. Dee Dee's sense of betrayal and resentment toward men became more pronounced as her marriage fell apart. Despite the turmoil in her marriage, Dee Dee's need for validation never waned. She continued to fabricate stories about her past, embellishing her beauty and achievements to make herself appear more glamorous than she truly was. She maintained a facade of success, even as her marriage with Rod deteriorated. The couple never consummated their marriage, and their relationship became increasingly strained. Dee Dee's behavior grew more erratic, and she distanced herself from her family and friends, pushing them away with her bitterness and paranoia. When Rod eventually left her, Dee Dee's anger and sense of betrayal reached their peak. Rod, who had been confiding in his best friend Christy about his desire to leave Dee Dee, finally made the decision to pack his things and go. On his 18th birthday, he left Dee Dee, telling her he no longer loved her and that their marriage had been a mistake. Dee Dee's response was violent, throwing their marriage certificate across the room in a fit of rage. Dee Dee's bitterness toward men and her deep sense of insecurity became central to her identity. She became defensive and paranoid, shutting people out of her life. Her inability to maintain relationships with others, even her own family, exacerbated her feelings of isolation. The deep sense of betrayal that she experienced from Rod and her father became the lens through which she saw the world. She was consumed with a need for vengeance, and this complicated her relationships with others. Despite all the chaos in her life, Dee Dee's obsession with control and validation persisted. She sought to manipulate those around her, creating a fictionalized version of her life where she was always admired and sought after. Her need for attention and admiration remained at the heart of her identity, influencing how she interacted with her daughter and everyone else in her life. As the narrator reflects on the complexity of their family dynamics, it becomes clear that Dee Dee's life was defined by a constant struggle for control, admiration, and a sense of importance. The story of Dee Dee Blanchard is one of a woman trapped by her own insecurities and the need for validation. Her actions were driven by a desire to create a life that appeared perfect on the outside, even as the reality was filled with manipulation, deceit, and dysfunction. Dee Dee's relationships, including her marriage to Rod and her interactions with her daughter, were shaped by her deep-rooted need to control and fabricate her reality. Ultimately, Dee Dee's life was one of chaos, deception, and emotional turmoil, leaving behind a legacy that her daughter would be left to navigate.